Alrighty, students, this is a recording to help you with working on annotating your readings. I'm going to be annotating a Word file, and you can do this too. In Blackboard, I'll put a Word document version of this reading of the Alan Johnson reading, What is a System of Privilege? And you can then download it to Word and you can annotate it just like this, so that if you don't have a printer, and I don't have a printer, you don't have to worry about not having paper. It's really important to annotate when you read. The stuff that you read in college is complicated. It's difficult. Most of it you're going to have to read more than once. You don't always have to understand every last word of what you're reading, but it does help to annotate because it helps you focus, it helps you concentrate, and it makes your reading a lot more efficient. It may feel like it's slowing you down, but it's actually not. It actually makes you a much more efficient and effective reader. So annotating means that you're just writing on what you're reading as you're reading it. You're like making notes, you're responding, you're engaging. Instead of like just reading and letting your mind wander, you're reading and you're really paying attention and reacting to what it is you're reading. There's a lot of different ways to annotate. We're going to start with approaching the annotation with like three things. We're going to think about three things that you're looking for. One is anchors. So that's stuff that you understand. The next is questions, and that's stuff that you don't understand but maybe feel like you need to. So there may be stuff that you don't understand and you're like, I don't know that I really need to know that. But then there's other stuff that you're like, you know, I really need to know this to understand this reading. And then there's comments, and you should always be reacting and making comments on what you're reading. So you could do this either by like underlining, or if you want to give it a try, you could try color coding your annotation by using different kinds of highlighting. So I'm going to get started right now. I'm going to do the reading with you, and I'm going to annotate it as we go so you can see what it looks like and see just like what the reading process is like, how this whole thing works. This, by the way, is a reading from the English 101 textbook, so it's a lot shorter than the kind of stuff you'll often get in English 101, but it's kind of that level of challenge. Okay, so this is from Alan Johnson. It's What is a System of Privilege? And I'm just going to go ahead and read and annotate. The concept of privilege refers to any advantage that is unearned, exclusive, and socially conferred. So I'm going to underline that. Like right off the bat, I'm doing Control U to underline. That seems really important. And this is a definition, right? He's defining this concept of privilege. I really need to know that I understand what unearned, exclusive, and socially conferred mean, right? That's really important. I need to know what that means. I need to know what those three words mean. I might even go back and like highlight them again, right? So maybe I'll like highlight that. What color did I say for questions? I think questions were yellow, right? It's not going to show up now anyway because I'm making notes on it. So I want to know what that means. I just made a comment. I'm going to keep going. For example, white people are generally assumed to be law-abiding until they show some sign that they are not, while people of color are routinely assumed to be criminals or potential criminals until they show that they're not. One way to see this is through a survey in which respondents were asked to close their eyes and picture a drug dealer. When asked to describe what they saw, almost 95% mentioned a black person, even though the vast majority of drug dealers in the U.S. are white. Okay, I got to react to this. Okay, so there's a couple things I'm thinking here. And really what I think here is like, this sounds true, right? It seems right, but he doesn't give any evidence, right? So he's like almost 95% mentioned a black person. 95% of whom? Like what is he, where did that 95% come from? So like it makes, like that idea makes sense to me intuitively. I think we do stereotype in that way, but at the same time, he just put that out there without really backing it up. All right, I'm gonna keep reading. So when it comes to being randomly stopped and frisked by police, and like stop and frisk, I'm just gonna like underline that because it reminds me of the stop and frisk policy in New York. Anyone identified as white has an advantage they did not earn, and that is exclusive to whites. So here's an advantage they did not earn, and that is exclusive to whites. I'm going to underline that because it relates back to that definition we saw at the beginning. It is socially conferred in the sense that it depends on them being perceived in a particular way by the police as white, before the advantage is given to them in the form of the assumption that they are not criminals. So this is something like, I wish we were in class. Like, I would really want to talk about this. Like, what does socially conferred mean? That means like something given to us by society, right? So society sees somebody, a cop sees somebody, identifies that person as white. And by the way, think about it. Like, how often do you identify somebody by their race? And like, what context does that usually happen in? So socially conferred meaning like that person didn't earn it, didn't create it themselves. I think we need to think about that more. And it depends on the person being perceived in a particular way by the police. Okay, so this is something I really want to, I would want us to spend some time on. Okay, I'm going to keep going though. It is important to note that privilege does not guarantee good outcomes for the privileged group or bad outcomes for everyone else. So this to me sounds really important. A lot of times when we talk about privilege or something like that, we often think that like there's been a lot of talk about white privilege lately in the news, and it makes it sound like everything for white people is easy and everything for people who are not white is terrible. And it's really not that simple. And there can be a lot of different kinds of privilege. So here, like, I want to put a note, like, this is true. I want to ask a question, like, I want to say, like, outcomes can be different. No, I don't know. That's what I want to say, like, not all white people have it easy. Okay, so let's keep going. I don't want to take too long because sometimes if you get stuck reading, then your mind wanders. I want to keep going forward because we're going to come back to this essay all semester. So this is really just our first reading. A white person, for example, can work hard and have little to show for it, can be mistreated by the police without cause, can be denied a job they're qualified for. Okay, so he's saying, like, just because there is this thing called white privilege, it's not like everything is perfect for white people. What privilege does is load the odds one way or the other so that the chance of bad things happening to white people as a category of people is much lower than for everyone else, and the chance of good things happening is much higher. Okay, so I want to underline that. That's really important. And I want to, like, white people as a category of people. I want to really point that out too. That to me sounds really important. Now, also keep in mind that as I'm reading this, I have read this article like many times. I've taught it in multiple classes. So as I'm reading it, I can dig in much more deeply than you would or anybody else would on a first reading. So I've read this a lot. I've talked about it a lot. I'm able to pull stuff out pretty easily because I'm really familiar with it. Even saying that, every time I read it, there's more stuff that I focus on. So like this idea of white people as a category of people. So he's not saying like every individual white person has everything go their way. He means that in general, white people have more money, more power, have things easier. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's true for every individual. Okay, so then he says, privilege is not something a person can have like a possession, as in where's mine. Instead, it is a characteristic of the social system, like a rule in a game in which everyone participates. This is really important. And Angela mentioned this in her discussion board post. She was talking about us being stuck in a system. We live in a system, which means we have a system that gives advantages to white people, gives advantages to straight people, gives advantages to men. But the people who are in that system didn't necessarily create it. It's like this game that we're all stuck in. Okay, so I'm going to underline that. That's really important. A system of privilege, a family, a workplace, a society, is organized around three basic principles: dominance, identification, and centeredness. Here again, I know this is really important. There's three words there. I know I'm going to need to understand what those three words mean. So I'm underlining stuff I understand, but I want to know, what do these mean? What do these mean? Okay. Okay, so I'm underlining stuff that makes sense, and then I'm asking some questions here, finding some stuff that I don't fully understand. You know what, I actually even want to come back here and say, you know, I'm not sure I fully get that idea of white people as a category of people, right? Because I want to have some questions in here. Okay, white dominance. So now he's talking about what white dominance is. White dominance doesn't mean that all white people are powerful, only that the powerful tend almost always to be white. And when a person of color occupies a position of power, that will be noted as an exception to the rule, as when Barack Obama is routinely identified as a black president and not just the president. So I'm going to underline that. That sounds really important. It sounds familiar. And I also want to make a comment, like people say, like this reminds me of how people say that because we had a black president, I didn't spell president right, whatever, president, racism is over, right? Nah, it didn't mark that way. Okay, white identification, right? That's important. White identification, he's giving me another definition here. White identification means that culture defines white people as the standard for human beings in general. People of color, for example, are routinely identified as non-white, a term that doesn't tell us what they are, but what they're not. Okay, that's very familiar. I'm going to underline that. When a category of people is named the standard for human beings in general, the path of least resistance is to see them as superior, there being no other reason to make them the standard. Okay, that's something I want us to talk about. I want to underline that, and I want, what does this mean? I'm not sure I understand that. Several things follow from this, including seeing the way they do things as simply human or normal, giving more credibility to their views than the views of others. In this case, people of color. White identification also encourages whites to be unaware of themselves as white, as if they didn't have a race at all. It also encourages whites to be unaware of white privilege. This sounds really important. This is worth thinking about. I wonder, is this changing? I think that is maybe different these days. White-centeredness is a tendency to put white people and what they do at the center of attention, the front page of a newspaper or magazine, the main character in the movie. This reminds me of Friends, the whitest show. I love Friends, but it's like the whitest show in the universe. Okay, I'm going to pause there and end this video here, and we're going to come back, okay? Hi, I'm back. We're going to keep going. That was just a little pause there. We're going to finish up the reading. When you organize a society in this way, the result will be patterns of unearned advantage that are available to whites simply because they are socially identified as white. I'm going to underline that. That's really important. And especially, I think what's really important here is patterns of unearned advantage. I want to know more about this. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that look like? Okay, a related consequence is patterns of oppression centered on people of color. Okay, that's really important too. I want to know what that means. Like what? Abundant research, for example, shows that whites and blacks are equally likely to use illegal drugs, which would lead us to expect them to be equally likely to wind up in prison for that offense. On top of that, young white males are the demographic most likely to sell illegal drugs. But a substantial majority of those imprisoned for drug offenses are mainly people of color, in spite of their much smaller share of the overall population. The white privilege in this example is the practice of the criminal justice system to overlook or respond less harshly to drug crimes committed by whites, while the corresponding oppressive consequence for people of color is the systematic selection of people of color for arrest, prosecution, and punishment. Okay, so I'm going to underline that. That's another thing that, like, to me sounds like intuitively it sounds right. It fits with my experience, but I would like some support, right? How does he support this argument? What's his evidence? And in this case, he says his evidence is down here. He says he's thinking about this book. And if you look on the blog that this is from, the website, there's more in the comments there that you can look at. So that's it. That's all it took to read and annotate this. And hopefully watching this video gives you some insight into what's going on in this article. Now that I've annotated it, I could also take notes by going back and pulling out those things that I've underlined, writing them down in a separate document and thinking about what they mean, which is in fact exactly what you are going to do in your system of privilege reflection assignment, which I am looking forward to reading. Have a great day.